Good morning again. There will be tea arriving in just a minute by the sounds and sight of things, but we'll go ahead and get started. Um, so I scribbled on the website the other day that what we're going to be talking about today is, what did I write? Mind only. Mind only, that's what it is. Mind only. So what's that all about? Well, it is a root teaching. It's one of the basic premises of most of Mahayana Buddhism, like the school of mind, Yogacara or Chittamatra. Buddhism, like most faiths, has many different ways of getting there. Christianity, there are the four Gospels, which were written like 70 to 120 years after the death of Christ, something like that. And they're all different stories telling the story from a different perspective for a different community. There's a unifying theme there. They all come together with, I guess, the Nicene Creed would be the unifying theme for all of those, which is the basic construct. In Islam, after the death of Muhammad, peace be upon him, there was a split, and lots of different sects grew up. There the mainstream Sunni, and then a whole bunch of different Shia sects grew up. And they all have different practices, different ways of getting there. The basic belief is, what is it? Ilaha la ilaha wa Muhammad Rasulullah. And there's no God but God, and Muhammad is a servant and prophet. That's the unifying system. Behind that, of course, stands the Quran. And there are all these different ways of getting there. The point of that is, these can become beliefs, or they can become practices that take us to liberation. Making them beliefs isn't very skillful, isn't very useful to me, because it gets us locked into dogma and causes separation, causes divisiveness, causes self and other, causes conflict. But if they become practices where we try it, and if it works, that's great. We tried a little bit more, and we tried a little bit more, that faith is built around it. And that becomes deep and can lead us to freedom. And the same is true in Buddhism. All the different schools of Buddhism are built on built on the Four Noble Truths, which are the truth of suffering, the truth of dukkha. Dukkha is usually translated as suffering, but the translation I like best is actually stress. It doesn't translate very well. But stress is much lighter weight, and we can feel it. The stressful things come up all the time. We can kind of physiologically feel stress much more easily. When it becomes really uncomfortable, yeah, it's suffering, and it gets worse. It can be agony. Dukkha is this very broad descriptor of things that are other than peace. So the truth of suffering, the cause of suffering. And the cause of suffering is it's a complicated description, but in simple terms, it's ignorance. It's not seeing clearly. It's mistaking things. It's mistaking things for being what they are not, and it's craving. It's wanting things. That it's possible to end suffering, and the path to the end of suffering. All of Buddhist teaching is based on those four basic truths. And it's a physician's diagnosis and treatment. And at the time Buddha was teaching, it's not that he was standing in for a physician. It's kind of the time of earth-based traditions and shamanism and older spiritual forms of spirituality. And the shaman, the spiritual teacher, was the physician. So Buddha actually was a physician. It really was. The spiritual leaders really were physicians. I think in Chinese medicine today, I think this is still true. In Chinese medicine, a physician, as a general rule, practicing with energy medicines, with acupuncture and various different forms of energy medicine, the physician is charged with keeping the patient well. And if they keep the patient well, they're doing a good job. If the patient gets sick, they've screwed up. They're a doctor. It's just the way it works. It's a little different. So we have preconception around what a doctor is, but it's a physician's diagnosis. And the way we chart this course is each of those 4 legs has a duty associated with it. And the duty is understanding suffering. And if we really understand suffering, that's great. It is abandoning causes of suffering. If we understand suffering, then we're in a position to abandon the causes of suffering. Realizing the end of suffering. Realizing the end of suffering is self-realization. It's awakening. It's enlightenment. And developing the path, developing the way to end suffering. So, thank you, Chad. So that's where we come back to the Chittamatra or the Vijnana or Yogacara systems. Yogacara shows up as, for purposes of, well, it shows up in 2 extreme ways. It's really convoluted and I'm oversimplifying it, but it serves the purpose of this presentation to look at it as there are 2 extreme versions of this. Mind only, in simple terms, means everything is mind with a capital M, not the little m that's our mind, but our little mind also is big mind, which actually, if you look back to the Four Noble Truths, the other piece of this, the cause of suffering, well, if you look at the nature of suffering, it is that every conditioned thing is impermanent. Everything that is conditioned is impermanent. And everything other than the unconditioned is conditioned. And the unconditioned is also talked about as the deathless, the birthless, Tathagata, awakening itself. It's the ineffable, and that is the unconditioned. Everything else is unconditioned. Excuse me, everything else is conditioned, and therefore is entangled inevitably with suffering, because as it's conditioned, it's impermanent. There's nothing to hold on to. There's no self-nature. So, mind only. This mind with a big M is precisely that unconditioned. Everything is a manifestation or an expression of the unconditioned. That's what the mind-only schools teach. Now, there are 2 different extremes of this. And the one extreme becomes idealistic, which is very ethereal. Everything's mind-only. Nothing exists. It's all a fantasy. It's a dream. It's an illusion. Blah, blah, blah. Ignore it. And that, of course, can lead to all sorts of problems. All sorts of problems. It can lead to problems in here where I just ignore stuff. I cut it off. And it can lead to problems out there where I just ignore the existence of suffering. And I continue blithely on, causing all sorts of suffering because it doesn't exist. It doesn't matter. So this extreme can cause all sorts of problems. The other extreme is a very material extreme. Everything is a projection of mind. This, look, it's real. It's mine. See this? This is mine. Catch. It's mine. It's overly material. So you're getting locked in on stuff again. And when we get locked in on stuff, then that bell is not the same as this. There's separation. So the skill with this mind-only tradition, in the same way as with all of the Buddhist traditions, is to figure out how to chart that middle course between these 2 extremes of the different ways of looking at mind. So I'm going to do this with reference to, I'm going to work through the Heart Sutra a little bit to play around with this. So it begins with form does not differ from emptiness. Emptiness does not differ from form. These are the 2 extremes. This comes straight out of the mind-only schools. Absolutely is central to Zen. Form does not differ from emptiness. Form is, and emptiness is, it's a long dream, it doesn't matter, la, 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 la. These are the 2 extremes, right? Form doesn't differ from emptiness. Emptiness doesn't differ from form. This is saying, no, you're misunderstanding form and you're misunderstanding emptiness. Form doesn't mean something like a throw and it hurts, and emptiness doesn't mean nothing exists. Emptiness is simply that out of which form expresses itself. Emptiness is inside form. Form doesn't have self-nature. There's nothing within form that we can really hold on to. And emptiness, I'm getting tangled up with which way around I'm doing this thing. So it's saying that when we get locked on form, actually that's a mistake, because there really isn't anything solid, anything reliable here. It's a projection, but it's not a concrete projection. And when we get locked on emptiness, that it's just a projection, there's nothing there, it's just an illusion. Well, it is an illusion. You bit the illusion. It kind of took a little bit of a hold and it created an emotional response. And all of that comes together as being what form really is. Form arising out of emptiness. So this is what every Sunday we chant this, and this is what we're saying. Avoid the two extremes. Avoid the two extremes of reification and nihilism. We walk through the world seeing the illusory nature of things, but not getting lost in the illusion. Therefore, given emptiness, there is no form, no sensation, no perception, etc. These are the senses. It's saying these aren't real, these aren't concrete, we can't hold on to them. So what do we do with them? These actually, by the way, these are Vijnana. So I talked about Vijnana Matra, the eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness. These are precisely what that's about. So when it says there is no eye, no ear, no nose, etc., it's not saying nothingness, nihilism. It's trying to land us in this middle ground. And you've got to take the first paragraph with it to realize that. It's trying to land us in this middle ground where we don't get caught in the thing, but we don't throw it away. It's not that there's nothing there. It's just not what we think it is. So last night we were all asleep. We probably all had dreams. Many of us have had some memory of those dreams when we woke up. Not all of us probably, but when we were in those dreams, they were real. If you have a nightmare, you have a real physiological response, and it can result in you just jolting out of sleep. That's real. But it's not real in the terms of something having self-nature, something being permanent, something being everlasting, something being a thing you could hold on to. It is a manifestation of mind, mind being the ineffable, mind being the only thing. Well, you can't even say it's permanent because it's outside space and time. I mean, space and time only arise when we move into the realm of the conditioning. So it's a manifestation of that. And that manifestation is both the dream and the dreamer. If you think about it in your dream, you are the whole world. You are the dreamer and you are the dream. Where's the subject and object in there? Pull the subject and object out of that and show me how they're separate. You are everything in your dream. All just mind. But somehow or other, when we look at it, we play this extraordinary exercise of separating the two and seeing that, oh, I was scared by this thing that happened in my dream. It's like I'm scared by my big finger, my little finger. It's the same. I mean, how does that work? It's the same as that, right? And the same is fundamentally true here in this illusory condition. which we call our waking state, but it isn't. We're simply not present. I mean, if you're honest, if you look at your average day, how much of your average day could you say you are fully aware of what you're doing? For most of us, it's really not very much. And it takes a fair amount of sitting on the cushion to realize quite how not present we really are. And then our aspiration becomes to be present more, because it's only by being present that we can see, that we can examine what I'm talking about. And by examining it, we can test it as a hypothesis. Because this is the same as all that stuff I talked about at the beginning. This is a testable hypothesis. It's one to play with. And is there truth in here? If there is, let's work with it. So the way that I mostly talk in this space, and the way most of us here talk in this space, it's because it is in American Zen insight, in American Buddhism and the insight tradition, and my lineage is Theravadan. It's the dominant way of talking about it. We work from this realm of stuff, of feelings, and so forth. And we say, well, if we look at the 12-link chain of causation, and we look really, really closely at our feelings, we can see how positive and negative feeling terms lead into craving. And if we just rest there with the feeling terms, it doesn't cascade into craving, and we can cut off this cascade. So we're working with this incrementalism, working to break this chain of escalation, which works. It's very skillful, and it allows for incrementalism. It allows you for you to come to this with a very noisy mind and start working down from noisy levels to a more subtle level and be cutting stuff off. It fundamentally works. And that way of talking about things doesn't talk very much about the enlightenment experience. Doesn't talk very much about waking up. Just talks about if you do all of this, then the unborn will show up. Consciousness without surface will show up. This mind-only approach really comes at it from the other side. It says, okay, so forget all that stuff. There is no form. There is no bell. And if we really play with that, when I say bell, what happens? When I say bell, I'm creating an object that is separate from me. There's discrimination and there's separation. That separation can only cause suffering. When I look at any of you and I put a name on any of you, I'm doing exactly the same. I'm creating separation, and that separation can only cause dukkha. Can only cause dukkha. It can never go the other way. So what is this? Many of you have seen me do this before. I've reduced it from a thing. I've changed it from being a thing to being part of a whole. It's part of an auditory experience. And I don't have to separate out the ends of that auditory experience. If you really pay attention when you walk around and you hear a noise, there's actually no inside or outside there. When you settle down and you this one happens to me, and I'm confident it happens to most, if not all of you. I'll have a thought come up. I find a person show up and I start talking to them, and then I realize they're not really there. It's a dream. It's like, if I drop into a sort of an absorption state, which you can do on the cushion, you can do when you're sitting on the couch. There's places where you slow down enough that alpha waves slow down, beta waves slow down. Alpha waves slow down, you drop into beta. That's where I know. You get from the higher frequency, which is thinking, to the contemplative state. And in that, it's like a dream state. Functionally, the brainwaves are at a dream level. And so within that, we can have people walk across your mind, and then you realize that's not a real person. So when in this dream state, the same is true. One of you walks across, and there's actually no separation. It's part that person and this person, that whole experience, it's all part of the same experience. There's actually no self and other in that. There is just the experience, which is all mind only. This. Right? And it's not about. It's the lived experience. And when we move into the lived experience, it starts dissolving. And at one hand, it becomes incredibly precious. We really look at this. It's beautiful. It's just exquisite. Beaten, it's multi-toned. It's beautiful. But on the other hand, it just dissolves. So this is the nature of mind only, which is, if we look at the form, it's not what it's beautiful, but the beauty isn't in it being this autonomous object. The beauty, oh, there's another one. Look at that. The beauty is it's being as part of the universe. It's placed in the universe. And at the same time, it dissolves. And there's no room in there for us falling on the extreme of there's nothing here. So I offer this, I brought this up as it's another way to practice and another way to live in the world. Said, how much of the time are we actually present? About this much. And part of the game that we're playing here is, can we stretch that and be present, see things for more of the time? Because that's how we have a chance to start seeing through and start waking up. And we have tools for doing that. This mind only, everything is mind, is another tool. You know, checking our feeling turns, looking at impermanence, these are tools. But just if you look at everything and say, there's no cushion, what does that mean? Well, that cushion is made of fabric. It was actually made by Chad, wherever he is. It's made by Chad with his sewing machine. And so this fabric that Chad has and this cotton or whatever twine that Chad uses, and that all came from wherever it comes from. There are people responsible for bringing all of that here. And inside it, that one there is a kapok. So, you know, if that burst open, a mouse or a bird, all over that. It would be a home. They'd take it off and put it in their nest or put it in their little mouse hole for their little babies. There's no cushion there. You could sit on it. So this is it's something we can take into the world with us, and mind only. Everything is mind, and by saying everything is mind, this takes us to the place that Thich Nhat Hanh calls into being. And yeah, into being just comes straight out of this whole mind only school. So that's what I have for you, folks.